All right, everybody, welcome back to Living and Loving Life podcast, Motivational Mondays. We have a wonderful guest today. We have Marlita with us. She's going to tell us a little bit about who she is and what she is currently involved in. Hi, Marlita.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So, I am first and foremost a life coach. And so I'm very passionate about helping people get through major transitions in their life, major relationship bumps in the road in their life. And I'm here to say we all have them, including myself.
Mhm.
And so I'm not here as someone who is untouchable and hasn't had those things happen. I'm here as kind of a walker through life with people to say, it's more normal than you think. And so
Right.
I enjoy helping people with that.
Nice. Awesome. So, Marlita, tell us a little bit on your journey, how you came about to doing this.
So I started my career in IT of all things. I was one of those kind of geeky girls with where, and born at a time when, the parents said, you're a girl, you shouldn't rely on a male to support you. And, you need to get your own career. And so I went into maths and sciences and um, I had a really good career for 16 years and I was just deeply unhappy as I came to the end of that. And when September 11th happened, that was kind of a crystallizing moment for me to kind of question, the meaning of life and just what I wanted to do with the rest of my time on the planet. And I had always been told, you're very easy to listen to. You're a good listener yourself. And so I took some time to study. I
Mhm.
went and did some religious studies, and then, which was more for myself. And then I did some psychology studies, and my passion was just to learn more about people and to help people more. Um, and so, fast forward a few years, I um, I spent a lot of my career in Australia. I had traveled a lot.
Nice.
I've been to over 30 countries, and so travel is a very passionate passion for me. And so one of those places was Australia. I ended up raising a family there and having a really good career there. But I found myself wanting to be back in the USA with my parents who were aging and needed me as kind of the oldest daughter.
Mhm.
And so I thought, well, this is the time. I had already become a registered psychologist in Australia, clinically seeing people for relationships, job counseling, all kinds of things. And relationships was always a very deep passion. Communication is a deep passion of mine. And so I moved to the USA, became a life coach and business coach. I do help people in family businesses as well.
Nice.
And I just find that we have such common occurrences of misunderstanding and assumption making. And because it's so common, I started to really say the same things over and over to clients. And I thought I really should capture this.
Mhm.
So I wrote a book to try to capture my view on life. It's not the only view,
Right.
but it's a view on what
Nice.
might help you.
So, being a licensed psychologist and then being a life coach,
Yes.
what do you think the differences are, and what do you enjoy about both?
So being a psychologist means I was trained completely, fully in mental health and the ability to diagnose things like personality disorder.
Mhm.
So it uses a diagnostic criteria to, determine whether someone has narcissism present in their experience or borderline personality disorder. But it also is able to use that scientific approach, which I deeply love, and also the ethics involved in psychology, evidence based practice,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. So we're not just guessing at things from our couch,
Right.
right? It's become very popular, I find, to kind of call people narcissistic
Mhm.
without really knowing whether we
The
should be
story.
calling them,
Right.
right?
Right.
And if you were that person, you wouldn't want to be given that label. And so I'm very much um, careful with people to say, we don't want to use labels that we're not qualified to use. So when I moved to the USA, it just means that my registration as a psychologist is valid in the US, in Australia. And it just means that I can't practice mental health here, but I can't also unknow what I know. And so,
Exactly.
so Australia recognizes my life coaching as psychological practice. And
Mm,
so the main difference is I don't speak into things like clinical depression. I
mm,
don't speak into those more diagnostic labels. And I have a mental health circle that I can refer out to
mhm.
as a life coach. So it's
Nice.
important. Life coaches more help people with patterns of behavior in their life, choice patterns,
Mhm,
proactive decision making. What
mhm.
can you do about your life? Um, so it's similar knowledge sets, but I find people are drawn to my life coaching because of the psychological knowledge. But I'm also very clear with them where I have to draw a boundary and can't speak into something
Right, right,
from my licensure. So
right. Okay, so that's really interesting, and it's interesting because I've talked to a couple psychologists, and it's I think they feel as if like life coaching is taking over their positions or their jobs, but I think it's just different. I think like for me, it comes from an intuitive side, which is something that can't be taught. It's either you
right.
have it or you don't. Um, and then that's when you can kind of reach someone differently than someone that needs to be clinically diagnosed on a different level.
Yes.
That's different.
Yes, it's very different.
It's
And
different in the sense of like you have a chemical, something's wrong, but then also there's that circumstances that life has put you through to have you have these kind of traits. Doesn't mean you are psychologically diagnosed, should be that. It's just something else. Do you know what I'm trying to say? I don't know if
yes,
I'm
yes.
using
And
the
even in
proper word.
Australia, our practice was very much less about a diagnostic label than saying you exhibit behaviors consistent with something, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm,
we might use the DSM-5. That was our tool of diagnosis to put together a treatment plan. And
mhm,
I very much, as a life coach, still follow the ethics of psychology, which is treatment plan based. It's
mhm.
very much agreement with the client. So the client
Is the better.
engages in and
Mhm,
leads the process, right?
mhm,
Psychologists truly believe that that is a collaboration between themselves and the client.
mhm.
We don't do medication, that's across the board.
Excellent.
And so for me, it's like I said, I can't unknow what I know, but I'm very clear when not to speak into someone's medication and not to speak. I also will not life coach without a treating psychologist's approval. And so,
Mm,
if you are already in some kind of psychological care with a psychiatrist or psychologist, I want to be on team with that person
right.
or not at all. Because one thing we were taught in psychology is not to interfere with other treatment plans. It's not accepted practice, and nor is it ethical.
Right,
Um,
because then you don't give the client what they're needing, because now you're
right,
conflicting, causing confusion, and it can make more the matter
right.
worse
It
than.
can cause more confusion.
Yeah.
That's a good word, right?
Mhm,
Than it brings help,
mhm,
um, especially when a client is presenting with that kind of more dependent nature, which is often the case. And so we want to make sure we don't uh, even appear to be competing for voice
yeah.
that way.
Right.
And so I'm very careful to ask people what therapy they've had in the past and what therapy they're currently going through, because I really dismiss myself at that point.
Mhm,
um, and when it comes to mental health, like I say, I have one amazing person here in town that I refer to on a regular basis when I know that this is outside
of
my
your sphere.
licensing. So I really truly work with people who don't have the presence of mental illness, and they also are either facing their own behavioral choices
Mhm,
or choosing their responses to other people's behavioral choices.
right.
And so I teach negotiation in that. I teach assertiveness. That's a big thing for me.
Mhm,
And so again, it's because I know both worlds, it's easy for me to keep in that boundary,
Mhm.
but I have to monitor it all the time. And I have to monitor it on behalf of the client in
Right,
case they're just not aware of the differences. So
right,
it's a very good point.
right. All right. So, Marlita, I know you have a book. Let's talk about that a little bit. What's the title of the book?
So the title is Say Something, and it's kind of written in the analogy of an adventure. So it's finding the right words, the adventure of finding the right words to express your desires, reduce drama, and create connection. And I wrote it because you'll know yourself if you've been in really heated, frustrated conflict with people. There's a moment in that conflict, often, not always, but often, where there's kind of a silence. There's kind of a disengagement by one party or the other party. And the party who's expecting more words says, say something,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
I need you to talk right now because I've just let it all out to you.
Mhm.
And so it's both that frustration of, I wish the other person would talk because I'm tired of doing all the heavy lifting of communication in my relationship. But also it's kind of that tongue in cheek from Facebook, like say something about this, so
Mhm.
it's a little bit of both. And the subtitle is all about trying to engage men and women, people from all walks of life, into that fun adventure side. This could be fun if you
Mhm.
approach it with that mindset,
Mhm.
rather than just dreading conflict, avoiding conversations. And so, really, it's 58 small chapters that talk in very digestible size because we don't have very big attention spans. Digestible, like I read past 3 or 4 pages. It's a very good book. So um, because we've got just so many things, like our brains are already wired for lots of opportunity, right?
Mhm.
And so I find it's little digestible pieces that take you on a journey through, some good positive assumptions when you're communicating with people. Chapter 1 is like, we all have the best intentions. Um, and we often go into conversations assuming the opposite, that
Yeah.
someone's out to
Take
fight us, hurt
Mhm.
us.
Mhm.
And so it's going to be hard. And then by believing it's hard, it becomes hard.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I hope it will be a kind of a lighter approach. And each chapter has workbook lines for you to actually, with my couples, I have couples going through the book together. They
Nice.
have a copy each and they write down their homework and then share it together
Nice.
in a family meeting. So
So
it's
say
supposed to be fun
something
and engaging.
is huge because I feel like that's what's wrong with a lot of situations is that people don't want to speak. They're
Right.
afraid of what's they're going to look like if they say something. How are people going to perceive it? Am I going to hurt feelings? You know, what is that going to look like versus just actually saying it? And like you said, it not ending up being as big of a deal as you thought it was going to be.
Right, right. I will have people in session with me who will, make a statement, an assumptive statement like, "Oh, he doesn't love me," or "I think they think I'm a bad person." And I'll ask, "What makes you think that?" These are conversations we've all had with our friends.
Mhm.
Um, and then they will give me either some kind of imagined or real evidence in their mind. And so um, I will then often ask, did you ask for that?
Mhm.
Did you say something, right? Have you asked them what that love that you need looks like, for them to give that to you in a way, everything from how to touch me to how to approach me at the end of my busy workday,
Mhm.
to how to correct me on how I loaded the dishwasher, to whatever the case may be. We make a lot of assumptions and we become, often the most wounded child we've ever been in our life, and we shut down for whatever good reason, protective, but we often don't come back to the table and say, that thing that happened an hour ago, that made me very uncomfortable, or I'd like you to be able to correct me, but here's a way to do it that isn't
Mhm.
so offensive to me,
Mhm.
because I get it, I'm not right about everything, but there's a way to approach me about that
Right.
and not treat me like you're the dad and I'm the kid,
Right.
or
Mhm.
whatever the case may be. There's lots of scenarios, right?
Right.
So
So, one thing that you've seen with your clients, what is the reason that people don't feel comfortable enough to speak up for themselves or say something? What?
I think what people have told me, I did a lot of research and asking, the people around me in my world what the biggest stopper was. And number one was they're afraid that they'll hurt somebody
Mm,
um, by even bringing up something as simple as the dishwasher.
yeah.
We really are so uh, sensitive to the feelings of those around us. And the more we live together, of course, or work together, happens at work too,
Hmm.
the more sensitive we become, and we become kind of trigger shy. Um, but number one was, I don't want to hurt them. I think they will feel hurt if I even say something small. The second one is, you know, that we simply make assumptions about how they feel about us before we even speak.
Mm,
And, I don't know about you, but I'm a person that would rather know that you have something to say to me.
hmm.
But there's just a way that I'd like you to approach it,
Hmm.
right? And we all have differences in that. And
Yeah.
so we have to figure that out
Yeah.
with each other. But
And that's
those are the
the
two big
way
ones.
of talking, communication.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, okay, awesome. I feel like, yeah, I think if people just talked in all aspects of life with their partners, at work, with their bosses, people could really get some questions answered that could really make them feel so much lighter and better because it won't be as bad as what you're assuming.
Yeah. There's one chapter in the book where I literally break down a four-step confrontation model. I don't even like the word confrontation because it's got all this negativity assigned to
Mhm,
it, but it's
mhm,
really just an assertive model with four simple steps, like one or two sentences each step.
mhm,
Really straightforward. You can practice writing it first.
mhm,
And then as you practice writing it and reading it, you can speak it more easily.
mm,
And once you begin to get this model kind of embedded in your mind, it becomes a lot easier to say this is, number one, this is what has occurred in my experience. Number two, this is the impact it had on me. And I even think it's had an impact on you. Number three, here's what I suggest we do instead of that.
mm,
Really straightforward, right? And then number four is just the natural consequences if nothing changes. So the natural consequences of us fighting over the dishwasher 200 times a month is that nobody's going to want to do the work. Nobody's going to want to do it in the presence of the other people, right? And so, and it's also going to make me shut down with respect to staying open with you, staying loving with you. And that's not a threat, it's just a natural consequence, right?
mhm,
So we want to not be threatening people. We want to be saying, listen, I'm going to drift away from you
mm,
if we can't figure this out. And I don't want to drift away from you. I want to stay connected to you,
mm.
right? And
Yeah.
open and safe. I want to be safe to do things that you might like to correct and have you correct them or give me feedback in a loving and caring way.
Mm.
So this is a big deal in workplaces. This is a big deal in
Everywhere.
homes,
Everywhere.
everywhere.
Mhm,
And so that model was actually from research back in the 80s. It's not something that I drafted. I've just used it over and over in my practice. And so I brought it back into, with the right footnotes, back into my work because it's every client that I use this with, because every client, no matter what they come to me for, has some kind of blockage with confrontation or speaking up for what they need. More so, it's about even saying what they want in the first place. This is what I'd like to see happen. Doesn't even have to be a conflict, right?
right.
Yeah.
So, do you think that this stems back to having a lack of self-confidence?
I think where sometimes, but self confidence, the lack of self confidence stems largely from being shut down as little people. So
Mhm.
I talk in the book about your little life. Your little life really determines um, how you were treated the first time you spoke up.
Mhm.
And I remember, there's stories of me speaking up, speaking my mind as a small child, where I got very sternly corrected because adults couldn't deal with what a child was saying. And so they would tell my parents, blah, blah, blah. She's been too, outspoken in this regard, or whatever the case may be. Even if that were true for a little child to be outspoken, that imprints on a child to say, well, it's not safe to talk.
Mhm.
It's not safe to say the actual truth because,
Mhm.
and so
Right.
I had very supportive parents who said, well, if you're the adult who can't deal with a child saying something, then it's probably you that needs the work. So they were supportive of me, but I still learned as a child, oh, adults struggle with the truth sometimes, right? And so that's all the lesson I needed to know. You have to be shut down sometimes. Maybe you're going to hurt somebody.
Mhm.
And so I do think it comes from young life, and maybe the self-esteem comes from just, I'm a big believer in self-image work,
Yeah.
what they call mirror work, which is doing affirmations in front of the mirror,
Yeah.
forgiving yourself when you've messed up.
Mhm.
Big deal.
Just being
And
kind to yourself and really
being
truly loving yourself, you know?
right,
And what I
right.
tell my clients, the easiest way for you to understand it is treat yourself like you would treat your children. You wouldn't
Yeah,
speak to your children that way. If
right.
if your child hurt their leg or stub their toe, you wouldn't say suck it up and keep on going. You would nurture that and give it that space and that
Yeah,
compassion and kind. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about my seat, is because I feel like self-love, people think that that's egotistical or narcissistic, but what it is if you don't even know how to love yourself properly, you won't be able to do that for anyone else.
right. It's so true.
It's just what you thought love looks like, instead of actually feeling what that genuine love looks like and feels like for you. I
Right,
think that people are just living life loving the way that they were taught. But does
right.
the way that they were taught, is that not toxic? Is that healthy way of loving yourself? You know? So
Hmm.
and then it stems back to not having that self-worth or knowing your value. So when you have something to say, is it worthy enough? Do they care
Yes.
enough?
Yeah,
But when
yeah,
you have all of that, yes, my words do matter. I am valuable. What I have to say matters. And
yes.
someone needs to hear it.
And as a person who speaks up, you have part of self-love for me is expecting a response, right?
Mhm, mhm,
So when you do speak up and you've had the courage to speak up, it's not just, a lot of people think, well, it's about just kind of getting it out and expressing yourself. And it is part of that. But it's also about, no, let's wait for the other person to respond also and make I call it making an audible choice
mhm,
with your voice.
mhm.
Because often we'll speak our mind and then we'll storm away, or we'll slip away or get quiet again. And we haven't actually gotten a verbal response from somebody.
Right.
And I'm a big believer in, silence isn't tacit agreement. You have to actually get feedback from somebody, because then they're making a choice. Well, I just disagreed with you, but I'm not going to tell you
Mhm,
because then you'll go harder at me
mhm.
or whatever. So I'm here to say it's about both parties making choices all the time. It's
Right.
about both caring about the other one's input and saying,
Mhm.
okay, somewhere in between is a negotiation that we simply have to choose our way through.
Right.
And both people involved should have a voice
Mhm.
in doing that.
Yeah.
Because as soon as one shuts down, it's not a relationship anymore.
Yeah. It's pretty
Yeah.
much doomed.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Okay, so tell me one of your hardest lessons that you've learned during your journey, and do you apply it to your day-to-day life?
I think, there have been many, but I think my biggest lesson is, what the moments when I have shut down and I have not spoken up. And I can think of one in the career, in my career, but also one in my marriage. You know, I'm an empty nester, and so my kids are all young adults now, and you know, strong people in the world, wonderful people.
Nice.
But when the kids move out, you know, there's a renegotiation that has to happen. And I think, you know, there was a time when I was making those assumptions, even with all the knowledge in my head I had, still making assumptions about whether this new relationship with the kids gone needed to be renegotiated or was hopeless, or, you know, what, somewhere in between, right? And so the biggest lesson I learned is that the grass isn't greener if you haven't completely thoroughly looked into the grass you're in and completely thoroughly explored these choices and these conversations.
Mhm.
And it's fortunate for me that my husband and I, you know, talked about all those things and renegotiated all those things, and we're still together. But that was a real thing. And I think, had I just cast it aside, as many do, whether they're 5 years into a relationship, 2 years in, or 35 years in, the same thing applies. Did you stop talking about it? Or did you start assuming the answers to the questions
Mhm.
and then never ask them? So that's probably the biggest one. That applies at work as well, where assumptions are made and you don't speak up, you
Right.
know?
And
And
miss
then
out on
people,
opportunities. Look, you would have missed
absolutely,
out on this amazing marriage if you didn't speak up. So
right.
that's the thing. It's not, I don't want people, I think a lot of times, even with my clients, when I tell them you have to speak up for yourself, you're your own person's advocate, it
Mm,
automatically triggers in their mind, oh, that means I have to be confrontational or I have to start a fight or an argument. And I'm like, no, you can do it
yeah,
respectfully. There, you have the choice of words. The words you choose to
absolutely.
use will dictate if it's going to turn to a bad situation or a good one. So just go
Yeah.
into it with the good work, with positive mind and the right words, and you'll be fine.
I'm really proud of there are many places in the book where I literally give somebody the opening sentence to start
Nice,
a tricky conversation, because
nice.
what I found was missing is I would say, "Well, did you say something?" And they would say, "Oh, they would respond like this, or they would shut me down, or they
Mhm.
would tell me to go jump in the lake," or whatever. Um, and I would say, "Well, what if you approached it with curiosity and help me understand?" And and again, I didn't invent these concepts. These I've just put them all together in one place from both what I have creatively come up with, but also what experts for many, many years have come up with in terms of
Mhm,
assertiveness psychology.
mhm.
It's a whole field of study in psychology that's very exciting. And it never gets old. It's never out of time,
Right.
um, because because we're people
Yeah,
and we make assumptions.
right.
So I'm very proud of giving people those starter things where they can sit
Nice.
down, and nobody's ever been really angry with you for being genuinely, lovingly curious about them.
Right.
If it's genuine and loving and curious and seeks new information,
Mhm.
most people will be like, "Oh, you're asking me a real question."
Yeah.
Not you're making, like, not you're pointing a finger at what a
Yeah.
idiot I am at the dishwasher, like, right?
Right.
So that matters a great deal.
Mhm.
Curiosity, uh, good assumptive energy,
Yeah.
right? To
Yeah.
assume it's gonna go well.
Yeah. All right. So tell me, what, in your opinion, does it mean to live and love life?
I think being, like you said, being an advocate for yourself, um, self-care for me is vital.
Mhm.
I'm a really hard worker, go-getter type person, and so I can work myself into an absolute exhausted pile of whatever
Mhm.
without too much effort. And so I'm no good to clients. I'm no good to anyone if I am not truly caring for myself. Now, that might be just some basic behavioral routines that I
Mhm.
put in place, good sleep,
Mhm.
good, you know, people underestimate sleep,
I know.
too much screen time,
Yeah.
too much texting time, too much high drama time,
Yeah.
getting involved in other people's drama, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So for me, it's keeping that peace of mind in yourself and your soul,
Yeah.
finding purpose and caring for your soul and your purpose every day. Takes work,
It does.
takes redirection for yourself,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So
Awesome. And I love that. And I love that you used yourself, because I think a lot of times people will say, well, how did you get there where I am? And I'm like, it's not a there, it's a continuous
it
everyday
is.
choice making,
I say
keeping.
in the book, I'm still there.
Yeah,
I have
I
been
like
one of
your
you.
skill
I have been
going.
one of you with a shutdown voice. And
Yeah.
there are some days and
So,
some situations where I still am that person.
and you have to redirect yourself.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. The
That's
universe is
constant.
here to teach us to grow, and we have to keep climbing the next
And
step
keep
up to grow.
watering it and keep nourishing it, because it could go easily backwards if you
Right.
don't take care of it and keep moving forward, for sure.
Yes, for sure.
All right, Marlita. So tell me, any new products or anywhere that the listeners can find you?
So my website is all the W's, marlitablackcoaching.com. And my book is on Amazon. It's available in ebook and paperback. So all the countries, Amazon website.
Nice.
So yeah.
Okay, and listeners, I will have all of her information in the show notes as well to get in contact with her. I want to thank you so much for your time and all of your knowledge. We appreciate it.
Thank you for
And
having me.
awesome. Thank you. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning back in. I hope you have an amazing week, and we'll see you back here next Monday. Have a great week.